Okay, thank you, Marcia, and thanks everyone here at the Center for Sacramento History. I really am thrilled to be here tonight. It's quite an honor to be invited. And I want to thank all of you for turning out on a Friday night to hear about local history. It's really inspiring to see so many people interested in the history of their area. Now, let me begin by taking you back to a blistering hot day in Sacramento in July of 1934 at noontime in downtown Sacramento near the corner of 8th and J Streets in the Communist Party headquarters, the headquarters of the state union known as the Cannery and Agricultural Workers Union. It was run by the Communist Party. And in the headquarters of this union, there were 15 men and women sitting around playing cards, having lunch, reading books, chatting with each other, when suddenly they were startled by pounding on the door. And then in rush through the door, scores of Sacramento policemen who had clubs and blackjacks and tear gas bombs and sawed-off shotguns. They took the 15 men and women and threw them up against the wall, trained their shotguns on them, and then ransacked the building for evidence of revolution. And they didn't find any weapons, but they found a lot of evidence of dissident politics. They found picket signs and Marxist literature and a picture of Comrade Lenin. And then they marched them all down to the Sacramento jail. Simultaneously, there were raids all over Sacramento that day at various places where communists congregated, including the Hooverville, which is very close to where we are now, along the river, and Plaza Park, which was a central gathering place in Sacramento for radicals in those days. And I have one of Rebecca's images here at the beginning to show you. You can see that the police were not very kind to the communists as they rounded them up. And they put these people in the drunk tank initially while the district attorney came up with charges against them. They were charged with criminal syndicalism. And soon 18 of them would go on trial in the longest trial in California history. It was called the Great Sacramento Conspiracy Trial. And it would attract attention from journalists all over the nation who converged on Sacramento to cover the great drama of the trial and the colorful characters in it. So what I want to do today is give you, first of all, a little bit of historical background about the trial. How did we get to this point? Who were these people? How did they get involved in it? And then I want to talk about the trial itself and the significance of it, because it has great historical significance, not just for Sacramento history, but for understanding the history of the Great Depression, the New Deal, and even the rise of modern conservatism. All right, so let's start with the background. All right, and the place to start, of course, in 1934 is the Great Depression. This is a graph of real GNP per capita from 1889 to 1940. And as you can see, as you all know, the economy just collapsed after 1939. The economy went into free fall. This meant misery for millions of Americans, and California was not immune from this misery. There were by 1932, the state was producing half the goods and services that it had produced in 1929, and more than 1/5 of the state's population was on public relief. Now, among the most desperate of Californians were the people who picked the crops. This is a photograph by Dorothea Lange, taken in the Imperial Valley, of a farm worker shack. There were hundreds of thousands of migratory laborers in California in the Great Depression who lived in places like this, or in their cars, or in ditches. California had a different pattern of landholding than the rest of the nation, in that it had very large farms. Not that there weren't small farmers, but it was dominated by very large landholdings. And oftentimes with absentee owners or corporate owners who hired on-site managers, who in turn relied on armies of migratory laborers to pick the crops. And there had been waves of immigrants who had picked California's crops. Japanese immigrants and Filipino immigrants, and then Mexican immigrants. But in the 1930s, these immigrant farm workers were joined by a new group. And that was the economy had collapsed to the point that there were many native-born white Americans who were desperate enough to come up to California and earn 10 cents an hour picking crops. And this is another photograph by Dorothea Lange, which I think really illustrates the change in the labor force in California in the 1930s. On the left, you have a sign advertising for cotton pickers. It's written in Spanish, and it's faded. And on the right, there's the new sign written in English. Now, this is Dorothea Lange's most famous photograph called Migrant Mother, this portrait of a desperate mother and her children in the Depression in the California fields. So there were hundreds of thousands of people who were in the situation of this desperate mother in the California fields during the Depression. These people earned, by 1932, they were earning on average $1 a day for a 10-hour day. And oftentimes they weren't paid in cash, but in scrip for the high-priced company store, which meant they could barely earn enough money for food and then for gas to get to the next job. You know, these farm workers wanted to organize collectively to raise their wages, but the difficulty was that none of the traditional unions wanted to go into the California fields and attempt to organize the workers. This is because these workers were migratory, so it's very difficult to organize them into a union. And also there were many different ethnic groups, they spoke many different languages. And then finally the growers really met these unionization efforts with terrific vehemence and violence. And oftentimes mobs of vigilantes were encouraged to go beat up the union organizers as well as the strikers. So the traditional unions were not interested in going into the California fields in the 1930s. As one organizer for the American Federation of Labor said, only fanatics are willing to live in shacks or tents and get their heads broken in the interests of migratory laborers. Right. This is where the communists come in. The communists were willing to live in shacks and tents and get their heads broken in the interest of migratory laborers. The Communist Party made a decision in the early 1930s to set up separate communist unions and try to organize workers collectively to raise their wages and improve their working conditions in the short term, and then in the long term to raise their revolutionary consciousness. And in California, the Communist Party set up a cannery and agricultural workers union and employed about 20 organizers to go into the fields, particularly the Central Valley, and encourage workers to form a union. Now, in practice, these communist organizers did not talk much about ideology. Many of them were not that ideological themselves. They were interested mainly in the cause, and they saw the cause as being a social justice in organizing the workers. And they didn't earn much for their efforts. They got about $7.50 a month. So they were very idealistic. Now, in California, the two most prominent communist union organizers would later go on trial in Sacramento. This man was named Pat Chambers. He was in his early 30s in 1934, and he had spent his whole life as a labor organizer. First as an organizer for the Industrial Workers of the World in their failed attempt to organize California workers in the 1910s. So when he was still a teenager, he was working for the IWW, trying to organize farm workers in California. Then in the 20s, he joined the Communist Party and attempted to organize workers all over the United States, moved from place to place. Then in the 30s, he came back to California and started working for the Cannery and Agricultural Workers Union. Now, he was not educated and he did not have a good command of grammar, and wasn't much of a public speaker, but he had a magnetic personality. And so he was known up and down the state as a real natural leader, having a lot of charisma, and so was quite well known among farm workers.